Have you ever stood beneath trees that seemed older than stars and felt they were watching you? Not in malice, not even in curiosity, but as one might watch a dream unfold, unsure whether to join or let it vanish with the mist. There is a forest in the heart of Transylvania where the wind no longer speaks its own name. It is called Hoia, but that is not its true name. That name was swallowed long ago, buried under centuries of moss and forgetting. Hoia listens. It breathes in silence. And when the sun rises, the light does not walk into its depths. It is swallowed. They say the trees bend inwards at the center, not from storm or time, but from reverence, as though something once knelt there and never rose. In the year 1908, a girl disappeared. She had been chasing a white moth through the orchard behind her mother's house. A small thing, white as salt, light as sleep, the kind of creature that seems half made of shadow. She wandered past the fence line, past the wild rose hedge, past the stones that marked the old road. Her mother called once, then twice. The third time, there was only silence, as though the sound had been caught in a thick net of branches. The villagers searched for 3 days. They beat drums, they burned sage, they whispered her name into the roots of the oldest oak. And then they buried a little dress they found, caught on the bark of a hawthorn tree. A single shoe facing the wrong way. A ribbon turned grey with dew. They mourned her as one mourns all who vanish, with songs and with slow forgetting. The kind of forgetting that keeps a place in the heart, but closes the window. 5 years passed. One winter evening, as snow fell without sound, a girl came walking into the village. She wore the same dress. She had no shoes, and her eyes were the color of wet stone and wider than any child's had a right to be. At first, they did not know her. She did not speak. She did not blink. Only when the baker's dog began to weep, not bark, but weep, did the priest step forward and whisper her name. Eleanor. She turned and smiled. But it was not joy, nor recognition. It was something colder, a smile not made for this world, but borrowed from a dream one should not have had. She was taken into the church. They wrapped her in wool. They offered her soup, stories, questions. She ate. She nodded. She answered nothing. Only once, when asked where she had been, did she speak. I went into the trees, she said, and they opened. No one knew what to make of it. Some believed she had been taken by gypsies. Others said wolves. One old woman, the last midwife in the valley, whispered of the Padurea V, the living forest. Not alive like a tree, she said, but alive like hunger. Elena's mother took her back. Of course she did. What else can a mother do when her lost child walks through the door with bare feet and leaves in her hair? But the girl was not quite the same. She no longer slept at night. She stood at the window, watching the woods, and when dawn came, she whispered words that no one could understand, not even herself. At school, the children would not sit near her. Not from cruelty, but from some instinct too old to name, like deer turning from a still pond that smells too much like silence. And then the dreams began. The villagers spoke of seeing her in the woods, though she had not left her house. A man woke with deep scratches on his chest and found leaves in his bed. A baby cried every night at the same hour, its breath steaming despite the summer heat. Elena said nothing, but she began to draw. Circles, always circles, with trees bending inward, their roots curled like fingers around something in the middle. Sometimes she drew eyes in the center, sometimes a mouth. Once she drew a girl standing in the middle, arms open, as if waiting for the forest to return. Her teacher burned the drawing, but it was too late. The village began to change. The well water tasted faintly of iron. The bread would not rise. A crow was born with 3 wings. No one blamed Elena, not aloud, but they no longer looked her in the eye. One day she walked into the forest again. This time they followed. Old men with torches, young ones with knives, mothers with prayers stitched into their coats. They walked until the trees changed, subtly but undeniably. The path did not widen. The air became heavier, but not with heat. It was a heaviness of memory, like walking into a place where grief still lingers, waiting. And then they saw the clearing. It was perfectly round. No leaves in the center. No sound. The wind itself circled around it, refusing to enter. Elena stood there, barefoot again, eyes closed. A white moth rested on her shoulder. She turned to them, and in a voice both older and softer than her own, she said, "This is where the first blood was taken. This is where the forest learned to hunger." Then she knelt, and the ground opened. Not with violence, not like a hole, but like a sigh, as if the earth had been waiting for her to return. Roots rose like hands. Moss spread like breath. The trees bowed inward, and she was gone. Not vanished, given. The villagers never spoke of it again. The clearing was never found, though many tried even years later with maps and markers. The forest folds time like cloth. It does not offer what it has claimed. Elena's mother died with a smile on her face. She said her daughter visited her in dreams, always barefoot, always with leaves in her hair. And in the years that followed, no child in the village ever fell sick. No crops failed. No wolves came near. The forest was not silent. It was listening. Sometimes at dusk a white moth will land on your window. If it does, do not speak. Do not move. Let it rest. It has traveled far, carrying something older than words, and if you listen closely, you might hear the forest whisper. It says, "She returned." And so we remember. Have you ever looked into a mirror, not to see yourself, but to remember something forgotten? Have you felt a chill behind the glass, as if the reflection is not truly yours, but borrowed from another time, another sorrow? There are mirrors that hold more than light. They drink memory, they keep whispers, they do not forget, even when all else fades. And in the crumbled hills above Cluj-Napoca, where stone cradles ruin and ruin cradles silence, there once stood a castle, not grand, not regal, but still somehow, listening. A grey heart of forgotten royalty, long lost to maps and mourning, and within that castle, it is said, lived a queen. She had no crown, no court, no name passed down in song. Only pale fingers and a silence that reached the edges of stone. They called her the Pale Queen, though none could say where she came from, nor why she never aged. It is said she lived alone except for her mirror. A tall, thin pane of silver glass, framed in black ash wood, carved with vines and thorned roses. It stood in the coldest chamber of the keep, and though the walls fell and the ceiling crumbled, that mirror never cracked. Not once. Long after the castle was swallowed by ivy and forgotten by travelers, a young man came seeking it. His name was Adeline. He was a school teacher, curious and soft-spoken, who had grown weary of chalk and cold hands. He had read of the mirror in a strange little book passed to him by a woman with no name and no eyes. He had thought it a tale, a dream stitched between old truths. But the forest guided him. And when he reached the ruin, there it stood, upright, clean, untouched by time. A mirror, shining faintly under moonlight. He did not see his reflection, only fog, and within that fog, movement not his own. He brought it home. In his modest cabin beside the river, he placed it by the window. He cleaned the glass. He lit candles before it. And that night, he dreamed. He dreamed of hands, soft white hands reaching up from dark water, and a woman with no mouth crying soundlessly beneath the waves. The next morning, he woke to find the mirror covered in frost. But it was summer. He began to avoid his own eyes. He taught his lessons. He tended his firewood. But each night the dreams returned. Always the woman, always the water, always the weeping. He began to change. His neighbors noticed. His skin grew paler. He no longer ate bread, only apples, soft and red. He spoke less. He sang to no one. But most of all, he listened. To what, none could say. But often, in the evening, he would sit before the mirror and tilt his head, as though a voice were murmuring from beneath the silver. One day, a child, curious, gentle, touched the mirror while Adeline stepped away. The glass rippled. A sound came, soft and low, like breath beneath earth. The child fell ill the next morning. A fever, eyes wide open, even in sleep, muttering a single word again and again. Regina, Regina, Regina. It meant queen. Adeline was summoned. He stood at the child's side, said nothing. Then he whispered into the mirror, barely loud enough to hear, "Let her go." The glass shimmered. The fever broke. But from that day forward, Adeline would not sleep in his bed. He slept before the mirror, sitting upright, as if guarding it, or praying. One winter, a traveler came. A woman dressed in black wool, her eyes lined with coal, her hands bare despite the snow. She asked for shelter. Adeline, though changed, was still kind. He welcomed her. That night she looked into the mirror and gasped. She saw the queen, not just her image, but her memory, a woman bound to glass by blood and sorrow. Long ago, the queen had fallen in love, not with a prince nor a knight, but with a being of river and mist, a spirit of the old river who sang her name through water and leaf. But such love had a price. To live with him, she had to shed her shadow, and so, through an ancient rite, she offered her reflection, the very image of her soul, to the mirror. It took it willingly, bound it in silver, held her sorrow in its endless breath. But the river spirit never returned. She waited. Seasons passed, and her shadow never grew back. So she remained, not dead, not living, watching herself through the glass, neither able to cross nor forget. The traveler told Adeline this in hushed words. And Adeline, with tears he could not explain, asked, "How can she be freed?" The woman did not answer, but she placed her hand on the mirror and whispered, "Give back what was taken." That night, Adeline dreamed of her, the queen, standing in water up to her knees, hands lifted, hair unbound. Her mouth opened, and she sang, not in words, but in sorrow so pure, the stars bent toward it. He woke before dawn, lit every candle, opened every window, and stood before the mirror. "I give you my shadow," he whispered. "I give you what I am." The mirror flared, not with light, but with stillness, a breath, a hush, and then a sound like shattering glass that left no shards. The mirror turned black, the glass clouded, and within it no queen remained, only the faint outline of a man, seated, still, sleeping forever. Adeline was gone, not dead, not vanished. He had taken her place. And somewhere, deep in the hills, in the crumbled remains of the old castle, a woman stood barefoot at the edge of a river. She was singing, not with words, but with joy. No one has seen the mirror since. But some say that when frost forms suddenly on warm nights and dreams taste faintly of river stones and candlelight, the pale queen remembers, and the man who gave his shadow still listens, not in sorrow, but in peace. So if you ever find a mirror where your reflection lingers just a little too long, do not speak. Bow gently. Step away. and remember, not every glass shows the living. Some simply wait. Have you ever met someone who seemed too kind, too quiet, as if they were listening to a song no one else could hear? Have you ever felt warmth from a stranger and yet walked away with the cold in your bones? There are those who do not hunger for food, nor for gold, nor for love. They hunger for something quieter, something darker, something you cannot name until it is gone. In the village of Mabinogion, nestled near the whispering hills of Sibiu, lived a man called Radu, a healer, a man of few words and clean hands. He came some time before the war. No one knew from where, and no one thought to ask. He arrived with a leather satchel of herbs, a white wolfhound at his side, and eyes the color of ash after rain. He moved into the old mill house, long abandoned, and turned it into a place of care. People came to him with fevers, with twisted ankles, with dreams they could not wake from. He cured them all, not with loud prayers, nor with grand gestures. Just a hand on the forehead, a quiet hum, a tincture made from things no one else could name. He asked no coin, only that the patient come alone and leave something behind, not an object, but a breath, a sorrow, a silence. They didn't notice at first. Only after months did a pattern begin to form. Those who were healed returned. Different, not worse, not unkind, but changed. They no longer laughed too loudly. They no longer cried in church. They no longer spoke of their dreams. Their shadows seemed to follow them too closely. They flinched from sunlight, and they all, everyone, avoided mirrors. One child, cured of a deadly fever, began to speak in whispers, even when alone. She would not say why. An old widow, healed of her aching joints, sat for hours in her garden staring at nothing. She said it was peaceful, but her eyes no longer blinked often enough. The priest visited Radu, asked if he used strange books, asked if he prayed before healing. Radu only smiled, a small, tired smile. "I ask permission," he said, "from the wound." The priest left uneased. Years passed. Radu aged slowly, or perhaps not at all. The children who had once run past him grew into men with lined faces, but Radu's hair remained the same color, not quite black, not quite gray, like old wood touched by frost. His wolfhound died. He did not bury it, only sat beside it for 3 days, unmoving. On the third night, the villagers saw something strange. A figure entered Radu's home. Thin, tall, wearing no shoes, its face hidden in a veil of dark mist. It stayed until dawn, then walked into the forest and vanished. No one dared ask. But from that night on, Radu stopped accepting visitors. He still lit the lantern on his porch, still left dried herbs hanging in bundles from the beams. But the door remained closed until the sickness came, a wasting illness. Flesh turned to paper, eyes hollowed, voices vanished. It swept through the village like wind through dry leaves. They came to his door, begged. He opened it, but not with urgency, with sadness, as though he had known this day would come and had hoped it never would. He let them in, one by one, each night a single soul, and each morning that soul would return home, alive, standing but silent. One woman, a weaver named Mara, left his house in tears, not from pain, but from absence. "I feel clean," she said, "but too clean. Like something I carried for years has been taken away. I don't know if it was mine." The sickness left the village after 13 nights. No one else fell ill, and Radu closed his door again. But this time, he did not light the lantern. They say he stopped eating. They say he stared into the corners of his house, murmuring to shadows. Until one day, the midwife came with a dream. In her dream, a man of stone wept beside a well of ink. He said, "I have eaten too many shadows. Now there is nothing left of me." She woke with cold breath and went to his door. It was open. Inside, everything was quiet. The fire had burned out. The herbs were all gone. And on the chair beside the cold stove sat Radu, eyes closed, mouth open in a silent sigh. In his lap was a single thing, a mirror, small, framed in bone, its surface black as sleep, but when she looked into it, she saw not herself, but every patient Radu had ever healed. All of them, together, standing in silence beneath a silver tree, and in the roots of the tree, something moved. Not a monster, not a man, but a hunger, patient, grieving. She covered the mirror with her shawl and took it far, far away, buried it where no light could find it. They buried Radu beside the river. No stone, no cross, only wild rosemary. The mill house still stands, but no birds land on its roof. No mice live in its walls. Even the ivy avoids its shadow. Sometimes children dare each other to touch the door. They say if you listen closely, you can hear a sigh from inside, as though the house itself is dreaming, or perhaps remembering. Because Radu was never cruel, never wicked. He gave what was asked of him, and took what no one else wanted. Grief, guilt, sorrow too heavy to carry. He swallowed it, and in doing so became something else. Not a vampire, not a ghost, a listener, one who fed not on blood, but on the soft dark that lives behind the ribs of the heart. So if you ever find yourself waking in the night with a weight gone from your chest, you do not remember losing. It may be that he passed by, took it gently, left you lighter. But listen, your shadow might stretch a little longer now. Your breath might feel a touch more distant. And if, in the mirror, your eyes seem older than you remember, close it and say softly, "Thank you, Radu. That is enough." Have you ever felt the earth beneath you breathe? Not the steady pulse of life above ground, but a slow, deep sigh from the roots of the world itself. Have you stood beside a well so old its stones seem to hum with something forgotten, something thirsty? Beneath thee, towering Fogarash mountains, where snow kisses the sky and shadows pool like ink, lies a secret whispered by the wind. A well so deep it is said to pierce the bones of the earth, touching a place no light can reach. The locals call it Aparoshe, the red water. Its name comes from the faint stain of rust that colors the rocks, and from the ancient blood spilled there, blood older than memory. Long ago, before the mountains wore their snowy crowns, before the forests stretched like a green sea, there were priests, blind priests, men who listened not with their ears, but with their souls. They carved deep into the earth, following the silent song of veins running beneath the ground. Day after day, century after century, they dug with hands worn raw by stone and sorrow. What they sought, no one can say. Not gold, not water, but something older, a breath lost beneath dust, a hunger waiting to be named. The villagers tell of a shepherd boy named Eli, a boy with hair like autumn fire and eyes like storm clouds. One night, the moon was thin as a knife, and the stars hung low, heavy with silence. Eli dreamt of a voice, soft, like the river's song in winter, calling his name from the well. He rose, barefoot and shivering, and followed the dream through tangled woods and crumbled ruins until he stood before the well's dark mouth. The air was colder here, not the cold of frost or snow, but the cold of waiting. He peered inside. The water was black as ink, still as death, but beneath the surface something moved, a shadow, a shape. The voice called again. Eli reached in, his hand brushed against something slick and cold. The well whispered. He did not pull away. Days passed, and Eli was gone. The villagers searched, but the mountain kept its secret. When he returned, months later, the boy was changed. His skin was pale, almost translucent, as if the moonlight had soaked into his flesh. His eyes, once bright with laughter, now stared without seeing. He did not speak, he did not eat, but he walked the village at night, his steps silent as falling leaves. And the river seemed to mourn him. The women whispered that Ili was cursed, but others said he was chosen. The midwife found strange marks on his wrists, tiny scars shaped like ancient runes. And when she laid her hands on him, she felt a cold deeper than winter's breath. One evening, the village gathered for the harvest feast. Ili sat apart near the fire, watching the flames dance. When the moon rose, he stood. His voice broke the silence. A voice not his own. He spoke of the well, of the hunger beneath the earth, of a thirst that no river could quench. He said, "The well is alive, it drinks, it remembers, and it waits." No one understood, but the forest listened, and the next day Ili vanished once more. This time, no one searched. The well had taken him, and it was said, on nights when the wind carries the scent of blood and moss, a pale figure walks the mountain paths, a figure with eyes like the deep water, a figure who drinks from the well beneath the earth. Some say Ili became the first echo of the vampire's thirst, not a creature of darkness, but a shadow born from the earth's own sorrow. And the well, it still waits, still listens, still hungers. If you ever find yourself near the Fogarash Mountains, and the air grows heavy with silence, listen. Perhaps you will hear the well's voice, a call beneath the stones, a whisper of thirst. Have you ever entered a place where time feels thinner, as if the air itself is made of memory? A place where silence is not empty, but full, heavy with stories spoken long ago and never forgotten. There is such a place deep beneath the earth, in the salt mines of Turda. A church carved not from wood or stone, but from salt, the ancient crystal tears of the earth. The miners speak of this church in whispers. They call it the Salt Cathedral, though no grand name can hold its quiet grace. Its walls shimmer faintly, catching light like the breath of the sea. Its arches curve like the ribs of a sleeping beast, and within its shadowed chapel waits a bride. She is not like any bride you have known. She wears no silk, no veil of lace. Her gown is carved from salt itself, delicate, translucent, shimmering with sorrow. The miners tell tales of the bride who came to the mine 1 century ago. Her name is lost, swept away like dust on the wind. Some say she was promised to a prince, taken too young, too far from sunlight. Others whisper she chose the salt as her shelter, a refuge from a darker fate. Her face is pale as the moonlight that filters through cracks in the rock. Her eyes hold no fear, only longing. They say if you enter the chapel alone and listen closely, you can hear soft music, not from bells, not from instruments, but from the salt itself. A humming, a weeping. Miners have left flowers on her altar. Small bouquets of wild thyme and lavender gathered from the surface world. Some say the bride tends these gifts in silence, her hands never touching, only receiving. One miner, a man named André, once spent a night in the chapel. He was searching for a vein of salt, but found something else. As he rested against a pillar, he felt a presence, a breath colder than the mine air. He dared to speak. "Are you the bride?" She did not answer with words, but the salt around him began to shimmer, a soft light like dawn breaking beneath stone. He saw a vision, a woman walking barefoot through a forest of glass trees, her veil trailing behind her like mist. She carried no sorrow, only hope, fragile and bright. When he awoke, the chapel was empty, but in his pocket he found a single salt crystal shaped like a heart. From that night, the mine was kinder, the tunnels breathed easier, the salt shone brighter. André carried the crystal with him always. The miners say the bride waits not for a wedding day, but for a promise kept, a vow to the earth and to the light. She is not a ghost, not a shadow. She is memory made flesh, a reminder that even in darkness, love endures. So if you ever find yourself beneath the mountains, in a place carved by ancient tears, listen for the bride's song. It will be soft, it will be quiet, but it will hold you. Have you ever felt the weight of a dream so old it bends the stars? Have you heard the silence that follows a comet's passing when the night itself holds its breath? Long before the word vampire was spoken, before stories of fangs and fire spread across lands, there was a being who slept beneath ice and ash, beneath mountain and memory. Beneath the still waters of Lake Santa Ana, cradled by the ancient Carpathian peaks, he lay buried, a shadow wrapped in cold, waiting for a time when the world would call him back. It is said that in the year of the black sun, a year when the skies burned with fire and shadow, a comet streaked across the heavens, its tail a river of light and darkness. And when it passed, the ice cracked, the waters stirred, and breath returned to the one who had long forgotten waking. He rose beneath a sky strange and new, and the animals did not flee. The trees did not whisper warnings. The wind carried no scent of fear. He was not evil, not yet. He was hunger made flesh, the first ache that could not be named. In his eyes, the cold of winter and the deep sorrow of the mountains. In his hands, the promise of endless night. He walked the forests and drank from the mist that clung to moss and stone. He listened to the songs of the earth, the whispered memories folded beneath roots and rivers. The villagers near the lake spoke in hushed tones of a figure they glimpsed in fog, a man with skin like pale marble and hair dark as raven wings. They said he moved without sound, and that the shadows lengthened when he passed. No one dared follow, no one dared speak his name. But some felt his presence, a quiet sorrow that settled in their bones like an old wound, a longing for something lost and perhaps never found. They say that on nights when the moon hides behind cloud and the lake's surface is still as glass, he walks its edges, waiting for the world to remember what it once feared, the ache that never ends. This was not the vampire of tales told by firelight, not a monster to be slain or feared, but a dream from before words had meaning, a hunger born from the earth's own sorrow. He is the first breath of night, the echo beneath the ice. And sometimes, when the wind carries the scent of frost and forgotten stars, you can hear his voice, a song without words, woven into the silence of the mountains. It is a song of waiting, of longing, of the slow return of shadow to light. Have you ever stood at the edge of a forest just as twilight breathes its last sigh, and felt the world behind you vanish into mist? Have you heard the hush that falls not from silence but from memory? This is where it ends, not with fire or blood, not with the turning of a blade, but with breath and the slow winding shut of a door that was never meant to open. The Carpathian forest sleeps again, its roots deep in time, its canopy heavy with secrets. But listen, do not move too quickly. The branches still murmur the names of those who walked between worlds. They say the veil has thickened now, that the forest no longer allows passage to those who come with fire in their hearts. The rituals have ended. The blood altars lie empty, the chants faded like smoke. No one walks the spiral paths anymore. No one dares to call the spirits by their true names. And yet, the land remembers. In the bark of the black firs, in the stones carved by hands long returned to soil, in the hush between raindrops when the old songs hum just beneath hearing. The forest spirits have turned inward, their glowing eyes shuttered behind moss and root. They do not hate, no, but they grieve. For what was broken, for what was burned. And the first vampire, they say he sleeps once more beneath the lake, his heart still, his hunger quieted by sorrow. Not slain, no, He is not something that can be slain, only forgotten, and even that is a kind of myth. There is no grave, no shrine, no candle burning for him, just water, still, dark, ancient. But sometimes, when the night is clear and the sky mirrors the stars, a ripple moves across the lake, and the trees lean in as if listening, and those who are very old, those who still remember the red moons and the songs that were sung only in dream, they close their doors and whisper to the fire, "Let him sleep. Let the woods keep their stories. Let the blood return to the earth." Because some tales are not meant to be awoken, some hungers are older than the sun, and some doors, once opened, never truly shut. We end now, where the mist curls low and the sky forgets itself. At the forest's edge, where your breath becomes fog and the leaves rustle like memory. You who have walked these 7 dreams with us, carry them gently. Do not retell them too loudly. Do not seek the lake at night. Do not follow the red star if it rises again. Instead, lie down. Let your eyelids drift closed like snow falling into pine. Let the hush cradle you. Let the shadows soften. The story is told. The veil has settled, and the forest exhales once more. Sleep now, dear wanderer of myths. Sleep and dream only of light.